So what I want to show you today is my take on rebuilding the NP11 Sony battery packs that go for the Sony BMC line of video cassette recorders. I've got a battery going here already, but what I didn't do, and I should have done in the first place, was demonstrate how I have taken these batteries apart in the past. So here's the two halves. Your battery pack would be inside of this, and the two halves are snapped together and glued apparently with some kind of adhesive. So on the side, let's make sure I'm halfway on camera. On the side with the little indicator thingamajig that tells you if it's a full or an empty battery. If you take that battery pack that's complete, that has its batteries inside of it, and you take, this is one of those little mini screwdrivers, little pocket size things. I suppose you could also use well, pretty much anything that's small like this with a fairly blunt point. You don't want anything sharp because it'll cut in, but there's a spot right next to this. Oh, here we go again. There's a spot right next to this empty full switch that is not glued. So you take that, so I get the best view, holding the battery, and you kind of press it flat down against the lower edge of the seam, not on it but below it, just a little bit. And you press that in there enough so that you can get the tip of your tool in there, and then it takes a little bit of wiggling around. It won't do that, but what you can do is you get that not sharp instrument in there and kind of wiggle and creep it along. It'll crack open that seam without necessarily destroying that lip. I think you can see it here. There's a lip there that goes up inside the top part of the clamshell. So you do that, you go along this edge. There's also a spot in the middle of this one that may or may not, this one was always tough, may or may not depress enough so you can get a tool under there. And if you work it back and forth, you should get this open seam and this open seam to join each other, and you continue down this side, and with a little bit of luck what you'll have is a busted seam that'll open up like that, and it'll use the I've cut this one, but this sticker thing almost like a hinge, and it'll just open up, and you'll take out your batteries. You'll see how they're arranged. Take note of how they are arranged in here. This is the original bunch of batteries that came out of this particular battery pack. You'll see there are your positive and negative contacts, your batteries, the alternating of how they're connected, the minus plus, all in series. There's also, and I haven't seen this in other videos, so I'll mention it now, when you get this thing apart, the back two batteries will be joined by this gadget. I don't know what this thing is, if it's a fusible link or some kind of thermal protection, I just don't know. But I know it joins these two batteries together, plus to minus, and I've included it in all the batteries that I've rebuilt so far, and it's worked fine. So with the new batteries, what I have done, and there's probably plenty of ways to do this, but this is what I have done. I started out, did a couple of different things. I have several different kinds of solder. I started out with this stuff, and it's just plain electrical solder, 0.041 millimeter thick, silver bearing rosin core solder. I like silver bearing because it's stronger. However, with my soldering iron, it takes a little more heat to melt that. So I switched to 6040, also rosin core. And if you can see, let me see what I can see. I don't know how much you can tell, but these two solder joints that have that fusible link thing, these were silver solder, and you can see how ragged those look. They're solid, but they're just kind of ragged. And I'm not really crazy about putting a lot of heat to these batteries. This side on these two cells, this is the 6040 non-silver bearing, and it was much nicer. I also used a different kind of flux. This is some flux I had. It's aluminum flux paste for soldering aluminum, blah blah blah, soft solder. I can't really read any more than that. But whatever this stuff is, I used a Q-tip to spread a little bit on the soldered surface. This still has its spot welded tab on it. I would do a couple things. I would take, before I soldered, I would take my Dremel tool with a little, that's a fine grinding stone on there. I'd remove that tab in most cases, grind a nice clean spot very gently. You don't want to grind through that metal cap, but you just want to make a clean spot. And then I took my Q-tip with some of this mystery flux on it, put it on there just a little bit, and then I would solder it, and I would get much better adhesion than without it. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know what the long-term consequences might be for using that flux, but it sure does make a nice joint. And you can see between the silver bearing side, which stuck quite well, and the 6040 side, how much neater and flatter it went. And those are both good joints. Those are good solid joints. As luck would have it, I found one more battery in my pile that hadn't been cut open. So here we are. A little more light. How's that look? Oh, better. So I got my flat blunt tool. This is the full empty switch. I'm going to press the tool into that unglued spot. You're not going to do this, might as well say it right now, you're not going to do this without doing some marring to it. And this may not be the end of the modification. So I got the end of the screwdriver in there, and I'm going to just rock it, try and move it along. Where is another? I'll take this putty knife. Put that in there and just work that seam. If you find a better way to do this, by all means, share your knowledge. This isn't terribly complex or difficult, but it is hard on the case. You see all the marks I've made already. I have cut myself doing this, so be aware. There, I'm up to the corner. I'm going to try and find another spot that'll give. This is not an exact science. It's clumsy and certainly doesn't make for a good video copy because it is as rough as it looks. There, got it in there. I'm going to try a different screwdriver, not that one, just a different screwdriver. There, that breaks open that corner. Now you can see it's partially opened. I'm going to look for another weak spot, which should be about here. Nope. Right on the end. I don't imagine you need to see the whole thing start to finish, because I'm sure by now you've gotten the idea. And you've either decided that you're willing to try it, or you've got better things to do with your spare time. I am going to cut along this edge, following the separation of top and bottom. Let's see what I get from this end. There. And there you have it. Wow, those batteries are really gnarly. These are also fairly, you don't want this stuff in your soil. Dispose of them properly. But that's basically it. And you remove the pack, and there you have it. Two halves, minimal damage, some marring, even the switch can be salvaged. Not that it matters much, at least not to me. Now that may or may not actually go back together again like that when you're done making your battery. But there it is. Keep track of this thing that goes under the positive terminal. There's that funny little fusible whatever it is. So now you have all your parts ready to make yourself a battery. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go through the process that I use when I've made several of these batteries. These batteries I've got here are one company. I bought them in a bunch. I made a couple of batteries. I had 6 left over. I need 8, so I got these. They're the same thing. NiCads, 1300 milliamps. Same sub-C design. What I've got to do though is, in the process of making this, oh, where's my pencil? In the process of soldering these together, these two batteries got a little bit sideways, so you can see how the tabs are not pointing in a straight line like they need to be. So I got to peel those off, and I will show you the soldering process. So these tab things, it's actually a darn shame that I have to take them off, but they'll peel off just like that. And with all of these, what I have done is rough them up with, like I said, an abrasive wheel on my Dremel tool. Not a lot, but I'll show you what I do. Also, by peeling those off, you leave the little stubby parts from the spot welds, so you would have to grind those off anyway. Please state that. Yeah. You want to take off the little stubbies. Scour up, whatever you want to call it, the area that you're going to be soldering to. And you're going to need to do that also with the batteries you're going to be putting in. I'm going to try and make these straight so I don't have to do this again. So I'll have to anyway. Whatever. The underside of the tabs that you're soldering also have to be scuffed up. Just a little bit, like that. So scuffed area plus to scuffed area minus, scuffed area minus to scuffed area plus, and that's the next 2 batteries in the series. And you want to, I've got this kind of bent up. You want these things as flat and straight as you can get them, so that you can hopefully get the original case, the clamshell, together like it should. Flux, have a little bit there, and on the underside of that tab, same thing here. This could all be in my head. I don't even know what little tube says aluminum flux paste. I have no idea. I just know that it sticks really well when I use it. So I've got everything straight. I've got all 8 batteries in the pack to keep everything wedged together. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to take some tool that I can't quite remember. Oh wait, I just use a screwdriver. So I'm going to take my solder. I'm going to put it on the tip of the soldering iron. Hold that down. And then go like that. I know the resolution isn't that great, but it's very simple and straightforward. Glob on the iron. And then get it going around here like this. Seems pretty good to me. I'm going to pull these out, flip this thing over. This is the underside of the battery. And wedge batteries back in here. I've already ground these 2 batteries. I'm going to take, for this part, I actually bought some of the tabs. Hold it down flat. Same thing on this one. Pack out. That looks pretty good. So then put everything in there. And as you can see, I've reused the paper jackets on the batteries. It makes them fit a little bit better. I don't know if I really need them or not, but I used them. Now the tricky part. The tricky part is getting where are the doodads? These things in their right place. That one's kind of shitty, but alright, so if you've gotten to this point, you should be able to take your meter and go across the positive and negative of the last two batteries, first and last batteries in the series, and 10.23, just like it should be. It won't have any amperage behind it because it hasn't been charged yet, but it should have enough residual charge in it. This is the part that to me is the trickiest. Getting these things to stick in the right spot and stay there. And put a little bit of that flux on it. And I did mark it off from there. I put the cover on it. I did mark off their locations according to the slots. How accurate that's going to be remains to be seen. I've never had a great deal, well, so far I haven't had a great deal of confidence in doing these. Next one, do my best to line it up with my marks. Check again. Oops. That should be it. Let's see how well I lined it up. Looks pretty good. I don't like it. Gotta bring it, I think, a little bit further forward. Go a little bit further ahead. And we're talking like less than a millimeter, I would say. again back together. That feels better. Okay. Now this almost wants to go back together. But it's a very snug fit inside these cameras. So I can show you what I've done. I'm not necessarily going to go to this extent, but this is what I have done in the past. This is an early try at one of these batteries, and not one of my favorites, but it works. I wound up having to drill out all the solder spots so that the expanded height would fit inside, because the originals were spot welded, which are almost completely flat. I don't think I'm going to have to go to that extreme, although I will have to do, I think, one side of the two. Everything looks good. I'm going to check to make sure I still have continuity. Go to DC, plus minus, and it's good. That means that all the batteries are connected properly. Okay, one last thing. I went and long story short, I wound up drilling out, or use a Forstner bit to wither away the inside of the battery tracks on both halves. Just a little bit. I didn't even go through. But I wanted to show you that it's still a little snug, but I think it'll be okay. But to test it, what I'm going to do is just put a piece of duct tape on here so I have something to grab. Stick it into this 110. There's the noise, it's engaged. And there you have it. Even uncharged, it's got enough juice to perform the basic functions. I'm not going to push my luck with that because I got to finish the battery, but I just wanted to show you what the end result would be through this mumbly video. I hope this helps you in whatever it is you're going to try and do. Till next time.